Okay.
And we are live on the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. It's a gray day in New York City, and we are joined today by our recently soaking wet guest, Mark Goldstein. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Gabe.
Mark is in San Francisco, and many of you will, of course, immediately recognize Mark from his work in the loyalty business and also as a speaker at the recent Gamification Summit that took place in April. Videos of the speakers from G Summit, including Mark, dozens of other folks available at gsummit.com, and you should check that out if you get a chance. And in the meantime, for those of you who are new to the show, welcome. If you haven't signed in yet and you're watching us live, please do click one of those buttons to sign in using your Twitter or Facebook credentials. Once you do that, you'll be able to join us here live, either in chat or with video. Once you're logged in, click one of those buttons that's somewhere around here on the screen, and you'll be able to ask us questions. And if you've got a camera on your computer, we can even bring you live on the air and get your questions answered from me or from Mark. Both of us are eager to help you any way that we can with your questions. And for those of you joining us via podcast or later, unfortunately, now's not a good time to ask questions, but we'll have your following information for me and Mark shortly on screen so you can follow us and ask us questions separately and offline. Okay, so Mark, here's the thing. You are one of the most interesting, important, influential people in the loyalty business over the last 10 years. I have one kind of big question for you that I think is on the minds of everybody. Why do most loyalty programs suck so bad?
um, well, I think it's because a lot of them don't really suck. It's just that a lot of people don't graduate to the fun parts. So, a lot of the programs they start off being pretty banal because all organizations want you to do is to buy a few things. And so what ends up happening is that most people don't graduate to the next tiers and don't graduate to where the fun begins. And so I think the perception is a lot of programs suck, and actually there's a lot of fun elements, but it's only 5 to 10% of the member base is really experiencing those fun things.
And why is that? Is that because the loyalty program folks are unable to kind of figure out how to make things fun for the whole population, or is it because they only really care about 5 to 10% of the people who use the program?
I think the big brands get all fixated on focusing on their most valuable customers because that's where the money is. So by focusing on that, the 5 or 10% of your customers that are, representing 80% of your profits, you can constantly be justifying, the expenses associated with your loyalty program. So I think that's what ends up happening is people get caught with their MVPs and they forget that they have to basically keep on mining the base and create new MVPs, every day. And so that's creating the perception that you're seeing.
Isn't that kind of weird, though, in a way? Because when we talk about how to design kind of gamified systems, and maybe this is part of the conflict between sort of advanced gamification thinking, advanced loyalty thinking, we really try to target all these different kinds of customers, sort of segmenting the audience and saying, people are motivated by different things. That Bartle's player types that many people have seen us talk about, achievement, killing, exploration, socializing. Why don't loyalty programs do a better job of talking to all those different audiences at the same time? Is there a resource constraint? Is it just not how they think about things?
I think it comes down to funding. I think when you're running a loyalty program, frequently the CEO or the CMO will basically, the loyalty program manager is sort of brought into the office and saying, show me the ROI, show me the ROI. And so you're always much more able, it's much easier to justify the ROI by saying, oh, well, we basically 60% of our reward and our reward spend went to 5% of our customers that are representing 80% of our profits. So it's an easier ROI story, and it's a shorter term story. Now, what you're describing is great. If people could take this long-term view and say, well, what's really important about what I do today is about who's going to be buying next year and the year after, and how do I basically, migrate my customers up? But a lot of loyalty program managers don't last 3 to 4 years on the job, and they're focusing on this quarter or next quarter, or they're part of a public company, and the public company is obviously, reporting the next quarter's earnings.
So, one question that actually came from, or kind of comment that came from Dutch, who's a regular viewer of the show, thanks for that, Dutch, is about designing sort of for the kind of mass markety kind of consumer, the basic consumer. And he asked about, designing a loyalty budget or focusing a loyalty budget on muggles, sort of short form for, normal people or people
Hmm.
without superpowers, but also asked about designing loyalty for brand evangelism, talking about this in the chat that's happening beside here. So should the loyalty industry be looking more at strengthening the sort of evangelism side of their customers? Because that's something that I often think about. It's like they don't really do much to help people become evangelists for their programs, do they?
Well, the larger companies, they silo their budgets. So the budgets are, one budget is acquisition, another budget is retention. And typically the loyalty program is coming from the retention budget. So what you're describing is all the monies that are sort of sitting in the acquisition budget, which, by the way, historically has been 80% of the budget. Things are shifting now. I mean, there's a lot of the more mature brands with more mature loyalty programs are realizing, no, we're better off spending money to get our customers to rebuy as opposed to make that first purchase. It's changing, but the point is it hasn't really fully changed. So if a company can basically rationalize taking some of the acquisition budget and putting it in the retention budget, what you're describing will happen. But it's just the way it's always been done. There's folks focusing on acquisition and folks focusing on retention.
So one of the
Does that
things
make
that
sense?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it makes sense why it is that way. I guess the open question is whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. I wrote this book that just came out a couple months ago called Gamification Revolution. And one of the things that we were looking at in the book is companies that are kind of leading with this idea of engaging customers and what they've been able to accomplish, a sort of new way of thinking about, not necessarily thinking about it as acquisition retention, but thinking about it as engagement in a big picture and baking those things in. I know you've been deep in the trenches. You've been so involved. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. But do you think that there's hope for some of these kind of big established brands to start thinking about this in a more creative way, or do you think this is really about the disruptor brands who are going to come in and say, let's use engagement, let's use gamification, let's use these new techniques, retention and acquisition, blah. It's all one problem. It's all engagement.
No, I mean, great CEOs get it. Look at Terry Lunger. Look at Macy's. Look how Macy's spends their money. They're very, very focused on basically thinking about how all these things come together, and look how important the loyalty program and its Star program is, and the Macy's cards, and but it takes, look at that CEO. What an awesome CEO he is. He's also been a CEO for, well, 20 years. He's been at the helm at Macy's for well over a decade. So he knows the number, he thinks long term. So if you're one of these type of CEOs, you get it and you are doing that. But a lot of organizations don't have these type of CEOs.
So, right. So you're saying that there's some kind of top-down energy that needs to be brought to this sort of question of how you create new kinds of engagement with customers. What do you think about those people? Because this conversation's happening over here in chat, like Michael Finney's often a guest here, talking now about his relationship with Simple, the bank, the sort of online bank,
Yeah.
very simplified bank. And I know you and your wife actually have a startup that's focused on kind of simplifying things called BackOps, I think that people want to hear about. But what do you think about the relative importance of the power of simplicity versus complexity? Because there's an argument that many of these programs, especially in travel and loyalty, have become so complicated that for the average user, that's actually like, blah, I don't want to talk about that. And actually simple programs, simple efforts at loyalty might have a great deal of power, or simple products might have a great deal of power because they're so clear. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a paradox, because I think a lot of folks that are really engaged with a brand, they almost want to sort of learn and spend time and trick and find out how they can, take best advantage of the loyalty program. And frequently that means understanding the rules. And so they're get more engaged with the brand or the process. So simplicity almost fights some of these best customers, because the best customers really want to will spend all this extra time, around getting those incremental points. The stories that we all know of, the last week of the year, where frequent flyers will get in an airplane and fly around the country just to get to that next tier. Um, that's an example of somebody who really knows the rules. And so the complex rules actually benefit some of these, sort of best, most valuable customers. Simplicity definitely benefits the earlier stage, the customers that might be engaged with a zillion different programs and also don't have the time or don't have the sort of the desire to sort of read and and find out more about the program.
But over time,
So
right?
I think it's I think yeah, I think over time. So I guess being clear, all programs should be whip simple, to and get people, to get people initially engaged. But what ends up happening again is that so many people are focused on that most valuable customer, that 80% of the profits, those 5% of the users who basically get, really engaged with the loyalty programs. And complexity actually plays to their interests.
Well, it seems like it seems like a bit of a paradox, right? With on multiple levels. But I always think about the loyalty programs from JetBlue and Southwest, both of which evolved to become significantly more complicated. You know, right? Like Southwest was a very simple, like buy four get one free program for a long time. It's rapid rewards program, and then
Right.
eventually they kind of adapted. So, what do you think is behind that? Do you think things always have to get more complicated over time? Because as you say, people get to this kind of level where they want more complexity.
The whales or the most valuable members of any given program have the audience of the brand. So what ends up happening, those folks are invited back to headquarters. The CEO talks with them, has coffee with them, and says, what do you want in a loyalty program? So they think, what would I like in a loyalty program? Well, what they want are actually things that they uniquely can earn because they're whales and most valuable players. So the programs start taking on this sort of the flavor of what the whales want, and the whales start driving the program because they have the audience of the CEO and management.
Very interesting. So we're for those of you just joining us, it's the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. We're talking today with Mark Goldstein, and Mark, of course, a longtime loyalty industry expert. And in fact, Mark, it's been 10 years ago. Last month, you founded a loyalty lab, right? Which was a sort of revolutionary idea to outsource loyalty and CRM. Had a tremendous run. Now in the hands of this company called Tipco, you advise lots of other companies, lots of startups, and you've gone on to help with your wife. You're the chairman of this company called BackOps. You want to tell everybody a little bit about BackOps and how is it? And I think I'm curious, and I'm sure that other people are, how you ended up becoming such an influential figure in the loyalty business in the first place. Like, what brought you to loyalty?
Well, the whole loyalty thing was because I started something called Blue Light, which was a spinoff of Kmart, and that was 14 years ago. And one of the things we were basically the multi-channel solution for Kmart, which at the time was the nation's third largest retailer. Part of our mission at Blue Light was to think through what would be a multi-channel loyalty program for Kmart stores. So I really got into it and got excited about it. But at the time, it was really expensive to build a loyalty program. We made some success. It was successful at Kmart. Kmart went bankrupt, but then I basically started Loyalty Lab with the idea of we're going to make it easy for companies to build loyalty programs. And Loyalty Lab went on over the next 10 years of becoming, the vendor for Sears, for Target, for Kohl's, for Nike, for Virgin. And so we basically have probably the best brands in America are using Loyalty Lab Tipco today. So it worked. But that's sort of how I got into loyalty because I just realized how sort of messed up it was. And so I said, let's make it simpler. The truth is Loyalty Lab's a great solution today. It's not just Loyalty Lab. There's so many great solutions that firms can use to deploy good loyalty programs. I then basically started BackOps because it was very different. I wanted to make it easy for entrepreneurs to start businesses and not have to worry about their back office, which typically drowns entrepreneurs and takes a lot of the focus off what they're trying to do. So that's the idea of BackOps.
So BackOps is super cool, and I love it. And I've told you I want to use it for our group here at Gamification Co. So hopefully folks will get a chance to check it out at backops.co. But one question that I have is, it's obvious that BackOps is not a loyalty play, but it seems like you've kept you've kept some feet, some fingers in the loyalty business. Where do you think it's going? Why are you still so passionate about it? Like, why have you were an advisor to Badgeville, right, or still are? Why are you so kind of passionate about the topic still? Why do you think there's still so much opportunity?
Well, I'm a gamer, and you think of basically where does gamification meet the real world? It meets it through primarily through loyalty and CRM programs, and so so I stay very involved. I'm involved with a number of different programs, formally and informally on the side, as as an active advisor, and I just really enjoy it. I just have a blast. Same time, I just didn't want to start another another loyalty company. I started enough companies, and I was just like, I decided to start a company with my wife, and this is what she wanted to do. So I just love this stuff. The answer is I just love this loyalty stuff, and it's just, it's what when I wake up in the morning, I basically just see, what's the next greatest idea, and obviously start at gamification.co for all those, fantastic ideas.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for the shout out. So
Oh, yes.
one question that comes from Dutch, which I'll rephrase another question, and Lauren Klein also sort of echoing that she thinks it's an interesting question. So we've been talking about those whales, right? Those top customers and how they respond. In the loyalty space, are most loyalty programs smart about understanding their newbies in particular, understanding that kind of onboarding experience of new users? And if so, why do they put the first kind of milestone for users typically so far down the road? Like, why do loyalty programs only work, for example, in airlines? I know
I think
you know that 25,000 mile point.
um, I think it comes down to what I mentioned. Is if the big sort of takeaway maybe should be is that you have 5% of the people that are driving a lot of the the innovation of the program. It's those whales, and they're desiring the complexity, and they're desiring the the functionality so that they can win, because they represent the profits of the company. And the that's that's the problem. So that's what happens with an incumbent loyalty program. And so over time, these incumbent programs start getting really stale, because they're really focused on an older audience, in a narrow audience, and not necessarily the audience that the brand needs to attract to be vibrant and successful, in the future. So the
So
best is when basically CEOs have these sort of kahunas and said, we're going to rethink this.
yeah. So speaking of rethinking things, I just want to get something off my chest here. So Walgreens, the nation's now I think the largest drugstore chain in the country, launched this big loyalty program last year called Balance Rewards
Yep.
towards the end of the year. And I don't know if you were involved in any way, and I apologize up front if you were, but man, it actually made me cry a little bit because I looked at this program, nation's largest, drugstore, and I looked at it and I thought the best that they could come up with at the end of 2012 was a swipe card that tax to every purchase and you get 1 point per purchase. Standard issue earn and burn loyalty program with the vaguest concept of a through line, a story, anything new or innovative to go with it. Why would they do something like
So Loyalty Lab did not uh, design the Walgreens program. We were this close. So we spent a lot of time with them. Walgreens is probably one of the most, conservative but, entrenched merchants in America. And, they wanted to launch a loyalty program. All they do is think about CVS. It's CVS versus Walgreens. And I think they actually did a pretty good job. They have components, like they have this concept called healthy rewards. There are a lot of pieces within their loyalty program that are really well gamified. Um, but they realized that they had to reach, the moms of America, and the moms of America wanted a grocery store-like program, and that's what they delivered. They delivered meat and potatoes. They did not deliver, four-star, restaurant innovation. They wanted to deliver Applebee's, and guess what? They delivered Applebee's.
But there seems to be some conflict in that because the moms of America are the largest gaming cohort in the world. They play more games overall than any other demographic group in the country. Why do retailers and we don't need to single out Walgreens, just, you're in the trenches, you've done these deals, you've talked to these people. Why don't they understand that? Or do they understand that?
I think that Walgreens is smack dab in the middle of the country. They wanted to basically reach a traditional customer and audience, a traditional mom. I don't think they wanted to be so crazily innovative and to risk their brand. To their credit, they basically did go all out. They launched the biggest loyalty program last year in the country. It's been, it's been really successful for them. And, as a result, they're happy. They're really happy about the success they're having with it.
So one thing that occurs to me too about the Walgreens program, and seems to be a common theme in loyalty that, often when we talk about gamified design, we're trying to think about, it seems that often in loyalty programs, eventually you have to restrict benefits. Like you start off, sometimes fairly generous on certain things, like Walgreens has the healthy rewards where they'll give you points for walking or running or something, right? But at some point, if people really use that thing, it becomes a sort of liability. The costs get too high. And most loyalty programs end up at some point tightening the economy, finding some way to wring some more cost benefits out of it and so on. So given that that's usually the pattern, why don't loyalty programs focus more on non-tangible rewards from the beginning so that they can scale those things more readily?
Well, remember, the loyalty program launch at a larger brand will be the most expensive new marketing initiative of the year. And so what the CEO doesn't want to do is go out too much on a limb for these, the more traditional companies and be too innovative and to take on too much risk. Now, look what happened to Ron Johnson at JCPenney. And what Ron Johnson did to the retail industry has set it back for 20 years. And Ron's a friend, and I completely respect everything he tried to do. But you just can't, for a traditional brand, you can't think like that. You have to think tradition first. And just because your customers are traditional. And so I think, getting to your point, why don't we see this stuff is that the incumbent brands who have the, a lower cost ability to launch a loyalty program because they already have all of the customers and members and they're able to sort of onboard people quickly, by default think traditionally, and it sort of sucks. But there's the little glimmer of greatness in all of the programs, and if the programs are successful, what you start seeing in the second and third year are some innovative. There's some innovative approaches on the programs, but they just got to start traditional because you don't want to get fired. Ron Johnson got fired.
Right, sure.
And he got fired by basically letting it all hang out there. And so, if you're at Walgreens and you're running a loyalty program, you don't want to be fired. Sort of sucks.
So do you think that this kind of traditional cycle, though, does it create some unique opportunities? Obviously, you see the potential in the gamification companies, right? Because you've been involved to sort of talk about the space and been involved with some of them. Do you think that all this kind of traditional thinking, for better or worse, creates some market opportunity for other companies?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think, look, we're seeing the programs get gamified, and then we're seeing a variety of things happen. We're seeing a younger customer. If a program isn't mobile first, if it's not, not gamified pretty quickly, it's going to be perceived as very stale. And it's going to be, the brand is going to have a harder time making it stand out and making people sort of get the type of repeat engagement that they're looking for. So I think that we're seeing actually a sea change, and I think it's pretty awesome how programs are much more innovative, and and it's a lot of it is thanks to the venture capital community has been able to fund all of these sort of standalone programs, in New York and San Francisco, these companies that are basically able to push out these innovative ideas that the traditional programs then inherit. But it's starting. It's just like, it's annoying, but you just don't want to end up, if you're running a loyalty program, you're sitting on a $5 million budget, you don't want to end up like Ron Johnson.
Do you, Ron Johnson being our, the sort of shorthand for getting fired, I think we're getting Ron Johnson.
Right.
So yeah, so on a kind of like
getting Johnsons.
That usually means something different. On a kind of on a sort of related note to this question, or to that question, let's say about these like kind of market opportunities, loyalty program opportunities. So some time ago, I was having a conversation with one of the big sort of operators, loyalty program operators, and we were talking about gamification and loyalty. And they were saying, when my first book came out, Game-Based Marketing, and we did the first G Summit all this time ago, they were saying that, gamification and loyalty were very similar. So we were talking about similar ideas and we were looking at loyalty programs as a form of gamification. And this is them talking to me. They said over the last 3 years, we've really seen a divergence of action and attitude. Like, and they went on to say, gamification people, you guys have like moved way ahead, and we're still kind of back here having this discussion, the same discussion we were having a few years ago. Coupled with this, there seems to be pressure being put on the cost of programs. So, new gamified providers coming in and offering loyalty programs at a fraction of the cost. Your startup was much cheaper than the previous option, right? Now Loyalty Lab being much cheaper than what it would have taken to build it from scratch. Now some of these gamified providers coming in, Punch Tab, for example, Bunchball, Badgeville, much cheaper again than the other kinds of
Yes,
options.
yes.
So what's going to happen here? Aren't we talking about kind of massive disruption of this particular industry by these techniques, both cost-wise and what do you see in the future for loyalty and gaming?
The more disruptive, the better. And so I completely agree with you. I think all these new companies, and I'm involved with a bunch, have made it so that it's so much easier and faster to launch a really powerful program, and it's so much easier to get 1 million members. We talk about and there's a threshold where you really a brand needs to get to 100,000 members to sort of even make the loyalty program move the dial, or to rationalize any point to spend money on it. So yes, it's these new companies that are representative of all the innovation. The traditional loyalty organizations are old school. They're looking more like the way Oracle looks in the database space. I don't believe any of you think of Walgreens, and we talked about Walgreens, we talked about Target. They're working with a lot of these innovative companies to sort of add this sort of sexy mobile-centric component to it all. And so I think the future is awesome. And I think the more gamified loyalty programs become, the more relevant they will be, on a going forward basis. And it's the hope for it's the great white hope. And it's making a difference. And you're seeing, but look at the loyalty program budgets are actually higher at most locations. A lot of the traditional loyalty programs aren't performing as well. But I think that has to also do with, and I'm going to finish up here, the fact that the landscape in a lot of sectors has changed. You have dominant players like Costco and Target and Walmart that basically are making it hard for traditional loyalty programs at grocery to work. So everyone says, oh, traditional programs are working. No, damn it, they're not working. They're working pretty damn good, and the more gamified they get, the better they're going to be.
So this is a new avenue of potential competition. And speaking of new avenues, one last question for you, Mark. Doing some quick research for my last book, Gamification Revolution, and talking to people about the subject of loyalty, many people think that loyalty is done. Like the average person will say, yeah, every brand has a loyalty program. But weirdly,
Right.
back of the envelope, the majority of companies actually don't have anything that looks like a loyalty program. And once you start looking at both employee engagement and customer engagement, admittedly, we don't usually put them together, but they're not that different from each other, really. The market opportunity seems humongous. We did some calculus that of the top 100 consumer-facing brands in America from the Forbes list of the top 100 consumer-facing brands in America, 60 of them don't have any loyalty offering whatsoever. So isn't there still a ton of market opportunity?
But they have CRM programs. So let's differentiate between explicit and implicit loyalty programs.
Sure.
So any great brand who doesn't know who their best customers are and isn't messaging them and isn't engaging them through sort of innovative special offers, special rewards, is crazy. 90% of the brands are doing it today. Salesforce did take over the world and convince people that there's a new world order. It's called CRM. And within the traditional CRM programs lurk traditional loyalty programs. So people that say loyalty is dead are nuts. It's actually alive and well. It's just in a lot of cases it's not an explicit program where you're signing up and earning points. But every customer is being scored. And that has always been the basis of any loyalty program, which is a point counter. And so if you think of what Clout brought to market, the idea of scoring your customer or scoring whomever you're working with is paramount and core to any CRM initiative.
Very interesting. Obviously we could keep talking about this. Probably I could talk to you about this forever. I definitely I'm curious about some of that CRM stuff because it seems to me like some brands like Apple or Kellogg's and two really big brands in America actually don't seem to be very good at that question. But it'd be interesting. We'll have to have a further conversation, dig in more to the implicit, explicit loyalty thing. In the meantime, thank you very much, Mark Goldstein, for being our guest today on the Gamification Revolution. You can follow everyone. You can follow Mark at MarkGee on Twitter. And also his new company, BackOps, backops.co, helping small companies with their backops and their employee management. Thank you, Mark.
Great. Gabe, enjoy Croatia, and I'll see you soon.
It's going to be amazing. And to all of you, thanks for being here on the Gamification Revolution. You can follow me on Twitter at @GZakerm. Next week, our guest will be Tacey Trowbridge from Adobe, who's designed a whole bunch of interesting gamified learning programs for Adobe. Thanks so much for being here. In the meantime, keep having fun, everybody. Take care.